Lately, you've probably been hearing more and more about this thing called Bitcoin. And since you've clicked on this video, chances are that you're wondering, should I start investing, keep going, or steer clear of it? Tell me in the comments below, are you here because you're thinking about putting some of your hard-earned money into Bitcoin? Or maybe you've already invested in Bitcoin and now you're having second thoughts? Or are you just wondering if this whole thing might be a scam? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so drop me a comment down below. So in the past 4 years of my journey of buying Bitcoin, I've asked myself these questions multiple times. When I first started investing into Bitcoin, I was just super excited about this new thing. I only invested a few $100s here and there wasn't much to lose. It was May 31st, 2021, and Bitcoin only cost $45,000 Canadian. Crazy cheap compared to Bitcoin's current price of $143,000 Canadian as per making of this video. I didn't have much money at the time and put most of my savings into the S&P 500. But as I learned more and more about the unique strengths of Bitcoin, I kept investing a few $100s here and there. And at that time, there were already plenty of cryptocurrencies out there. I dabbled in Ethereum, Dogecoin, and even a little bit of Shiba Inu. Still not sure how that happened. But what kept pulling me back to Bitcoin was this. It had something that the others didn't, which was scarcity. Now imagine this. All the other coins or altcoins out there can be printed endlessly. And what happens to something when there's no limit to how much you can make? It stops being scarce. And when something isn't scarce, its value tends to drop over time, which is exactly what we're seeing with so many of these other coins. And I'm so glad that I got rid of my altcoins a long time ago. Bitcoin is a totally different animal. Bitcoin's code, created by its mysterious inventor Satoshi Nakamoto, made it so that there could never be more than 21 million coins. The last coin will actually be mined in the year 2140. Right now, 93% of all Bitcoin have already been mined, and there are only 7% left, meaning that the supply of new Bitcoins is continually decreasing. And after that, as the demand for Bitcoin continues to rise, there will be no more Bitcoin mined or created, which will further increase Bitcoin's price. So that alone convinced me to keep investing in Bitcoin. So I opened my first account on a Canadian crypto exchange called Index, and I still use it until this day. There's so many other crypto exchanges out there that you can use, but I like Index a lot for its super low fees. They only charge 0.2% for buying Bitcoin, and when it comes time for you to withdraw your Bitcoin to a cold storage, which is recommended, there's a no fee option where you can withdraw your Bitcoin for free. So in case you're starting your Bitcoin journey today, consider using Index. You can also get a $10 bonus if you use my referral link in the descriptions down below. By the way, guys, I'm also starting a new channel where I'm releasing a tutorial on how to use Index. It may or may not be ready yet, but in case it is, you will find it up here. Shortly after, I also started buying Bitcoin on Wealthsimple. If you have a regular account, the crypto trading fees are actually quite expensive at 2%. But at that time, for me, it was just convenient to have all my holdings, so my other investments and crypto on one platform. To buy larger amounts, I'd use Index. But if you're just starting out and want one platform for all of your investments combined, including stocks and so on, then Wealthsimple is actually a good choice. I already withdrew some Bitcoin, or Satoshis to be exact, Bitcoin fractions from Wealthsimple, and it's also cheap and easy to do. So just in case you want to go with Wealthsimple, use my referral code down below, which gets you a $25 bonus. So I started learning more about Bitcoin, and the price kept going up to $62,000 Canadian and even $84,000 Canadian towards the end of 2021, and my confidence in it grew. But I'd be lying if I said that I never had cold feet. In 2022, Bitcoin saw a sharp drop in price, and being a Bitcoin beginner at the time, sometimes I asked myself if I had made a mistake. Had I already invested too much in Bitcoin? Should I have invested much more in the S&P 500 instead? And would I lose all of my money? I think most Bitcoiners go through this phase at some point, at least once. For a very short moment, I even asked myself if I should stop investing in Bitcoin altogether. But luckily, I didn't. I kept investing throughout 2022, 2023, and in 2024, that was when I stumbled upon a video of Michael Saylor that really opened my eyes on why I had to invest in Bitcoin and could not afford not to invest in Bitcoin. And that was truly a revelation. So here's the thing he said, and I'm saying all of this in my own words because I couldn't find the original video, and this is something I bet 90 or even 95% of people are not aware of, including Canadians. The earth-shattering thing is that the real rate inflation is not the 2% or 1.7% or whatever is reported in the news. No, whatever country you're looking at, likely the real inflation rates are much, much higher than that. Most people are not aware of this, so they look at an inflation rate of 2 or 3% and everything seems fine, but it's not. And here I need to briefly go into the difference between CPI, or Consumer Price Index, what people commonly mean when they talk about inflation, and monetary inflation. And once you understand the difference, you'll understand why Bitcoin is so important and life-changing. The CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, represents changes in prices over time based on the cost of a fixed basket of goods and services. This includes things like food, shelter, clothing, transportation, and so on. But ask yourself this question: does this basket of goods really reflect our standard of living? I don't think so. I go into the supermarket and I don't see just 2% price increases. I see 10-20% price increases. Also, it doesn't include assets like stocks, so the way CPI is calculated is understated. It gives you a false sense of security, and it makes you believe that you'll be fine financially with your yearly 5% salary increase, if that's a thing, and 4% interest earnings from your GIC. But then, guys, there's monetary inflation, which means how much new money is being created by central banks. It happens when the government prints or creates new money, increasing the total money supply. And remember what we said earlier about scarcity? When something is unlimited, it loses its value. When the US dollar or the Canadian dollar or the euro flows into the economy, each dollar that you hold loses purchasing power. Every dollar buys you less stuff over time. So forget growing your wealth for a second. The first goal is simply not falling behind inflation. Just keeping up with inflation is a challenge on its own. Many people, myself included back then, invest into stocks, ETFs like the S&P 500, and that's great. That way they think they can outdo inflation and can actually grow their money. But turns out that's wrong. This graph is from one of Michael Saylor's presentation on Bitcoin, where he shows how different assets keep up with monetary inflation. So let's start from the right end, and I'll only go through some of them to explain how most of us are playing a risky game when it comes to investing. If you hold cash, here US cash, your money basically doesn't grow, unless you then convert it into a weaker currency and plan to live off of that later on. With bonds, you get a couple of percentages in return, which doesn't even help you keep up with the purported CPI inflation. Consumer inflation. The lower line is the CPI line, the inflation you hear about in the news. But above that is the line that says monetary inflation. Here we're getting closer to the truth, and that, according to Saylor, is closer to 15%. Just think of it very carefully. If the money supply grows by 15%, what happens to your wealth if your assets grow at a much lower rate than that? You lose value year after year. Now, you could invest into the S&P 500. That's what I've done for the longest time, and I am still doing as well. And by doing that, you'd just be about on par with inflation. But you're not really outdoing it. You're not really growing your wealth. Now, when you get into a bit riskier territory and invest into the NASDAQ 100, for example, you're gaining a few more points. But then there's Bitcoin. Compared to all other assets, it's grown by 60% on average each year for the last 14 years. Now, before you think that this is just a US thing and it's not relevant to Canada, let's look at Canada's numbers. Here you see that inflation, so just CPI over the last 20 years, was 2.2%. Sounds okay. Housing, though, was 5.9%, but the money supply grew over 7.3% each year. The S&P 500 grew at about 8.3% each year, and note the numbers are different from the US numbers because this covers a slightly different time frame. Based on these numbers, it means that if you'd invested into an S&P 500 ETF, you'd only outdo monetary inflation by about 1%. One measly percent. So guys, what do you think so far? Are you still convinced that it is enough to invest in the S&P 500? Or worse, just a GIC? Whatever you believed about Bitcoin to this point, I ask you to at least consider it. Study it and then make up your own mind. Note, guys, again, this is not financial advice, but I just had to share this with you because I'd regret not telling you this important truth that will impact your finances in the long run. For those of you who think Bitcoin is a fad or a scam, it's a legit thought and you should critically question everything, but also really think about it. Bitcoin is not a new thing. A fad or a trend lasts for a season, while Bitcoin has been around since 2008, 17 years. And over that time frame, while it was highly volatile, overall it has been going up and up. Now it's sitting at about $145,000 Canadian as per making of this video, or 104,000 US dollars. It's been my best performing investment in my portfolio in the past years, outdoing all others. Consider that Bitcoin is open source. I can't read code, but anyone who can just go and inspect Bitcoin's code as it is public and there are no secrets. Also consider that now even institutions, countries, companies are beginning to adopt Bitcoin increasingly. Even companies like Fidelity and BlackRock have bought Bitcoin and are now recommending investors to invest a portion of their money into Bitcoin. Now guys, there's much more to talk about Bitcoin, so I've recently decided to start a new channel, Satoshis to Bitcoin, for those of you who want to get started with Bitcoin. I break down everything in detail and give you the basics so you can learn about Bitcoin, how to buy it, how to move it to cold storage, and so on. The channel may or may not be launched already, but if it is, I'll link it right here. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.